Bitcoin at $13,000. Fact or fiction? This is around the blockchain. Thank you for joining. Go ahead, hit that like button. We have a great show with some great guests on today. We're going to get right into it. On the top left, we have AJ holding it down in Ben's office. AJ, have you been writing anything good recently?
Oh, man. I have been, but I can't tell you what it is. I'm going to keep it on the DL.
All right. Tell me after the show, maybe. All right. Then also we have Tim Warren. Tim, you done any good TA lately?
I've done some pretty good TA, and if we might end up talking about some of it today.
All right. Looking forward to it. And then we have Mind Your Biz. And Mind Your Biz, have you found a good privacy coin lately?
Well, one or two, but that might just be my alpha. We'll see.
All right. Well, maybe you can share in the comment section. All right. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, $13,000 risk. This is from Gareth Soloway. I was looking at those numbers. He is still holding firm to his guns. He was saying this as long as he's been on this show, I think over a year at this point, definitely over a year at this point, still calling for a new low that we should be retesting at some point in 2023. This is despite year to date, Bitcoin has gained over 70% thus far as we're rolling into the end of March right here. And this is coming after recent bank failures: Silvergate, Silicon Valley Signature Bank, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, potentially in some hot water right now. But this is with the interview with Kitco News. So big shout out to Gareth for getting on Kitco. Although he did say as the financial system becomes more stable, Bitcoin's value will decrease potentially as low as 9K in 2023. Mind your biz. I don't want to ask you about any price predictions, but I do want to ask you about stabilization predictions. He's saying, although it's potential, I want to make sure I quote him here. We could have a Lehman Brothers drawdown, but this is a basic financial crisis 2.0. We don't know how bad it's going to get. This is like a Lehman moment, potentially. By the end of the year, they go hit 12, 13K. Do you think that we're potentially heading towards a Lehman Brothers type collapse, or nothing has really happened in 5 days? And I know it sounds a little bit crazy to say, hey, 5 days, no action here. But in the digital world, maybe that means a month in previous timelines. So what are your, I don't want to say predictions, but what are you feeling in the headwinds and the temperature of the room when it comes to more potential bank collapses? Yay, nay? Are you starting to stack that Monero? What's Mind Your Biz thinking?
Well, thank you for having me back on the show. It's always such a pleasure and a privilege to be on with such great thinkers. And I appreciate that you brought up what Gareth is saying about this potential for Bitcoin to retrace into an incredibly low and for things to maybe fall out further underneath the banking sector. I happen to agree. And I think Gareth and I have had very similar targets. I'm not going to bring up that price again, but we've talked about very similar targets, but for very different reasons. He's reading the charts, which to me is the same as reading tea leaves or throwing chicken bones on the ground. I don't understand that, right? It's voodoo magic to me. I really don't. I'll never oversell my ability as some kind of technician with the charts. But what the data says to me from the mining side, right, from the supply side, and I'm not going to, invoke stock to flow. I don't think stock to flow is a particularly sound model, but there is some basis for believing that we could go back to lower levels with Bitcoin based on hash rate alone and the bare cost to produce one full Bitcoin. And some of Gareth's targets seemed to, I don't know that they adjusted. I can't take any credit for it. I mean, I'd be flattered if he was considering at all anything that I'm saying here. But we started to say the same rough price targets when I started to really hone in on this would be the bare cost to produce Bitcoin in North America or in established markets in Western countries throughout the world, as opposed to going really cheap places like China, which supposedly it's outlawed, and Kazakhstan and the other former Eastern Bloc countries where you can source really cheap power. If you wanted to mine Bitcoin in developed nations, you would have a bare cost to produce one full Bitcoin. There may be some correlation there. I don't want to make any weird predictions, but there may be some correlation there. And then based on what we've been seeing in the banking sector, DZ, I don't think it's a controversial take here among crypto people to say that if you ask, can it get worse? Yeah, hold on to your hat, because it can always get worse. The banking sector could actually get worse than it is right now, and it wouldn't shock me one bit. No.
To double down on that, I don't think it's controversial to suggest that either, that cost of goods produced is going to have some sort of weight on the price. And of course, we're talking about the cost of electricity to mine Bitcoin. At the end of the day, they're going to be looking at, okay, this was my electric bill. It must have at least some influence on it. I would agree on that. Well, Tim Warren, TA, I'm almost with Mind Your Biz. I don't understand it. And it's up there with chicken bones when it comes to my skill set. Does Tim's TA, does that stand for tea leaf accumulator? Is that your strategy? You throw tea leaves down?
Yeah, let's go with it. I
Yeah.
never heard that one, but we're going to stick with it. Yeah.
Some about drawing lines and, it's supposed to just like bounce off some targets here. Do you think, what is your thoughts when it comes to strictly TA? Is the TA calling for a 12K, 13K? Is that in the cards in your book?
There's a couple of reasons why I don't think so. I do want to say, just like Mind Your Biz said, anything is possible. But when we say anything is possible, a lot of people want to use that phrase to say that only means to the downside, but it also means to the upside. It's also possible that we have massive inflation and Bitcoin's price just takes off like crazy. Here's where I think Gareth is getting some things correctly. I am predicting a crash to come later on this year. The question is what comes before that crash. Anyone who's been watching the Investing Bros knows that I'm watching that 2019 period very closely that we might repeat, where we have a run up back to the golden pocket. And this is like radio version of TA. So you guys are gonna have to just imagine a chart with me. We're gonna go back up to the golden pocket, which is around $48,000, $50,000. And then we will have potentially a 50% dip. What does that bring us back down to? 25,200. Well, what is 25,200? That is a very significant level because that was the former resistance, the stiff resistance we got back in August before we really started to dump out to what I am, at least right now, is the bottom, what I think will remain the bottom of this bear market Bitcoin price. Here's some other things that you should look at to question and say, is the bear market actually done? Are we actually getting our lows in right now? And that is by using Fibonacci. So again, I'm using radio version of TA here, but I challenge everyone who does TA, go back on your charts and check this out. A lot of people will use the logarithmic chart to use Fibonacci, and they'll look at things like, I think back in, 2013, 2014, we only came back during that bear market back down to the not even to the 0.382 level. Then in 2017, we went to the 0.382 level. Now we're sitting at the 0.5 level. There's no continuation. There's no similarity whatsoever. That's why you got to switch around TA from time to time and go look at the linear chart. Every single bear market on the linear chart when using Fibonacci has pulled back into what is called the platinum pocket. The platinum pocket is 0.786 down to 0.887. Every single bear market goes into that platinum pocket. Guess what we've already done? We've entered that platinum pocket. We came back up out of it. I'm not saying that makes it 100%, but where I think Gareth is right is a crash is coming. The question is, do we have such a run up before then that crash just brings us back down to these levels? Or does that crash take us down to 13? Either one is technically possible, but at the moment, I'm leaning more in the camp of saying a run up to 48,000, 50,000, and then a pullback to 25.2.
And Platinum Pocket, not to be mistaken with Prism Pocket, of course. I'm also seeing similar price ranges. I think we'll go up to the 40s, 50s, and then another. I like that number. It's a nice round number of 50% drawdown there. Now, AJ, I want to talk about, potential black swans, or maybe it's just going to be malaise and just no one cares about crypto anymore. What could it take to drag crypto down to 13K? I thought I saw everything when we saw FTX. There's only a few bullets left in that chamber. I mean, would it be a black swan event that would get it down that low, or would it just be general miscontent?
I mean, we would have to define that as a black swan, whatever it was, either, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan going down or something crazy. It would have to be something massive, because if you look at COVID and how bad that was in terms of a world event, it didn't do that much damage in terms of price action. I mean, 13,000 is 53% below from where we are right now. And that's a pretty far dip down. So it's going to take some catastrophic event to bring us down that far. But to circle back to Garrett's thoughts, so basically where I am sitting looking at Bitcoin right now is that we have an SR level that was the floor in May 21 and May 22. But right now we're below that, and it looks like we're going to get rejected from that 29, 30K level. So getting above 30K and bullishly retesting it is what we have to do to keep this going. If we get clearly rejected from this 29, 30K level, it's bad news bears for everyone. And to go with his thought that for 13K is that if you look at the low from June and the low from November and kind of draw that line down on the chart, that would intersect with 13K in May of this year. So is this, if he's correct, is it sell in May, walk away round 3? Because sell in
Don't
May,
say that, AJ. Do
sell
not
in
say
May,
that.
hold on, sell in May in 2021 was a 40% drop with a 50% wick. In 2022, it was a 27% drop. And if it happened it would be a 52, 53% drop from now. So if Gareth is right, maybe crypto face, everything sell in May, walk away. Maybe it's going to happen a third time. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be more than a meme. I will be watching that month very, very closely. All right, let's talk about the Restrict Act. This headline just really sums it up very well. The insanely broad, not the insane banking broad, the insanely broad Restrict Act could ban much more than just TikTok. Could be used to ban TikTok, but could also impact many other types of services too, including VPNs. Well, I have some numbers for you that you might not like when it comes to using a VPN. Now, to be clear, this isn't just to use a VPN, but it's to use a VPN to access what they call a banned app. And if you do use a VPN to access a banned app, you could be facing just a slap on the wrist of up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Doesn't explicitly define what that banned app would be. However, could be a cold brush. It could be VPNs, could be cold wallets, could be overseas exchanges, could just be software. Privacy advocates are warning that this Restrict Act could eradicate any semblance of digital privacy in the U.S., significant implications for individual freedoms. A lot of people are calling it the Patriot Act 2.0, maybe the digital version. Mind Your Biz, I would like to, could you maybe draw some parallels? Do you see this as a new version of the Patriot Act? And just to remind people at home, Patriot Act, at the time it was passed, it was with thunderous applause. Democracy died with thunderous applause. And then, looking back, hindsight's 2020. A lot of politicians have come forward and say they regret voting for it. And we've actually had whistleblowers come forward and say, how a lot of this is unconstitutional. Essentially, we look back and said, hey, you know what? Maybe that wasn't the best idea. Are you seeing parallels here? Is this worse than the Patriot Act? Is this not as bad? What's your take on this?
Well, I view this as sort of the icing to the cake of the Patriot Act, Easy. So, I remember when the Patriot Act was passed, I remember 9/11 still very vividly, and the Patriot Act being a response to it, or really more of a reaction to it. Never let a good tragedy go to waste, they say in the political rooms, right, in the political spaces. Even if, especially when it's at our expense, the taxpayers and the people that live in these countries, when we're suffering, they're secretly cheering because it gives them an opportunity to grab whatever power, whatever agenda item they want next. And that certainly happened with the Patriot Act. In this case, I think what we're finding is that it's going to seal all of the powers that the Patriot Act initially proposed, but didn't know that it needed yet in order to really get that extra bit of control over the people, because it goes from where there's any trace, any semblance of somebody doing something that's inappropriate here in our shores or abroad, who's an American citizen, and can label them an enemy combatant, right, an enemy of the state. There's some very, very messed up powers granted in the Patriot Act. And so you might think with this one, the Restrict Act, like, well, it's not that serious. 20 years in prison. Well, maybe you deserved it. Maybe you did something wrong. Well, no. What we already have in place with the Patriot Act, and I ranted about this over on Mind Your Biz this morning. I basically gave a constitutional lecture about the first 5 amendments to the Constitution, only because I had them memorized by heart. And I think that you should too. I'm talking to the audience. I'm dead serious. The first 10 amendments to our Constitution are such critical things to know. If you do not know them and you're an American citizen, please, after this show, go and educate yourself, because they are actually at risk. But let me please mention a couple of parts of the Constitution, because they're relevant to the Restrict Act. First, our freedom of speech. VPNs are essential to our freedom of speech, and here's why. You don't have access to one side of the conversation if you're restricted from being able to observe it or answer your questions in private. If everything you do is observed, your behavior will change, and you will not continue to have the conversations you would normally have if you know you're being observed by some other person, least of all, an authority. VPNs allow us to go access information that we would be afraid to ask in public and do so without fear of reprisal. The Second Amendment, we're gonna skip over that for the moment, but you know what it is. The Third Amendment, probably not relevant here. Fourth, though, is very relevant: to be secure in our papers and in our belongings. In a modern digital world, everything we do is digital. So being secure in our papers requires encryption, and it requires encrypted tunnels to be able to communicate from one point to another. VPNs provide that, and they provide it at scale. So to punish people for being secure and exercising their Fourth Amendment rights when they're on a computer, you're effectively punishing people for exercising the rights that are protected in the United States Constitution. And then last but not least, this is relevant to the Restrict Act, is the Fifth Amendment. And if you ever watched cop shows, any TV shows or cop movies, you know what it is. It's the Miranda rights, right? You need to have the right to remain silent. And the only way you can do that is through privacy. By any other name, that is privacy. It just means I have these thoughts that I'm thinking to myself. I'm not trying to publish anything. I just want to think what I need to think, learn what I want to know, and not have to divulge it to other people. And in a digital world, it requires tools to preserve that ability. VPNs protect that. And so anybody who's endorsing this, anybody who's cheering this on, needs to be voted out of office or threatened to be voted out of office immediately. I feel some kind of way about this, DZ. You may have struck a nerve with me.
Yeah, and when you brought up VPNs, I want to share this excerpt from an article. Many individuals, including journalists, activists, human rights defenders, use VPNs to protect their online activity from surveillance and censorship. I just want to, highlight, there are people who may leave an adversarial government. They're a refugee, and if they want to be able to speak freely about their government without agents crossing borders and, bringing you into an embassy.
And online privacy rights are women's rights. There are women who are in abusive relationships who need to be able to communicate and spend privately to be able to get themselves out of harm's way. And they're not the only marginalized population, right? That's like that. But privacy is women's rights.
Definitely a great point there. Well, I do want to share what the Restrict Act stands for. I'm always a fan of a good acronym here, even though it begins with restriction. Restrict stands for restricting the emergence of security threats that risk information and communications technology. Restrict. So good job, whatever peon in some congressional leader's office that had to come up with that one there. All right. Well, Tim Warren, a lot of scary things here. What would it be like if this is enforced? Can they really have a nationwide crackdown on VPNs? What is the future going to look like? Can I expect Comcast Cable to dry snitch on DZ?
Yeah, very interesting. I loved what Mind Your Biz was saying there a second ago, and it made me think about the fact of like a hammer in the hands of your handyman is a very good thing. They're going to fix a lot of problems in your household. A hammer in the hand of a lunatic, though, is an absolute nightmare. And that's the problem that we're really looking at here. The numbers of the voting were very alarming. The amount of congressmen who voted on this in support of it. In reality, as you mentioned in that article, it is that absolute chaos and that fear of what's happening with TikTok and what TikTok's able to do with infiltrating people's phones and people's laptops and giving information. And so it's one of those things, just like the Patriot Act, it makes a lot of sense. It just like a hammer, hey, we got to get this nail in the wall. It makes a lot of sense to use that hammer. The problem is, though, that the handyman will change. And if the next person is a lunatic, that lunatic can go anywhere they want and do anything they want with that hammer. In the same way, I'm not actually that concerned as it stands right now for the foreseeable future about people's ability to use VPNs to trade and do other things going away. I'm not that afraid of that. It's the precedence, though, and that's where people should be alarmed right now, is the precedence that right now, maybe it's a handyman. Maybe this whole thing was to take down TikTok and keep people from being hurt there. The problem is that it's going to stretch past this layer. We're going to get new politicians in there that abuse this power, and it's going to hurt the individual. Now, let's say this lunatic, which is not hard to imagine, comes into power here very quickly. Maybe we already have a lunatic in power. I'll leave that for every person to individually decide for themselves. Let's say they do weaponize this right now against VPNs. How's that going to go? That's going to take a very long time for that enforcement to actually happen. As you just even mentioned with your article, that was something I was going to mention too. VPNs are not just used so that you can watch things in locations you're not located in. It's not just used so you can trade cryptocurrency in an exchange that doesn't belong or isn't allowed in your country. It is used for so many reasons to protect the individual's right to privacy. And that's why I'm not necessarily too worried. But if they do come for that, I really hope people stand up and start to make their voices known. Again, very alarming how many congressmen voted for that bill, which leads me to believe they haven't even really done their due diligence to understand what they voted on. They just saw such a threat in TikTok, and they were so convinced we need to depower TikTok they voted in approval, and hopefully this gets seen with a little more light, and people in the Congress and Senate come out against this in the future, especially if it starts to infringe on people's right to privacy.
Oh, you said politicians might not have read the bill. What kind of world do we live in where that is a regular occurrence here? And you brought up hammers. Thank you for not mentioning Paul Pelosi. Crypto Crow, we're talking about the Restrict Act. Tim, he brought up TikTok. I want to ask you specifically about TikTok. Should TikTok be banned in the U.S.? Yay or nay? Why or why not?
Well, sorry I'm late.
No, you're good. In fact, we're going to give you 5 points since you're sandbagged already.
That's okay. I've been paying attention to this, and to me, it just looks like them trying to clamp down on anyone's ability to find alternative narratives that aren't being prescribed through, regular media. I mean, when a lot of the stuff that I see, whether it's, medical reports or court hearings or whatever, it's not from, my cable news networks or my mainstream media. It's from TikTok or other alternative news sources. And I get the whole idea that, in China, TikTok is used for education and games and basically things to make kids' lives better. And here it's like twerking and camel toes and stuff like that, and it's like, okay, I get that too, but we all build our own algorithm. I mean, I'm just being honest about it. I mean, reality, unless it's just my app, I don't know. But I see a lot of there's so much political information that I get bombarded with, and it's not stuff that people are making up. It's generally people that are citing this resource and showing it, and citing that resource and showing it. And there's definitely a wide array of information, but ultimately, I think that so much information that I discover, that I find, or that gets presented to me on TikTok is outside of the reach of most people that don't want me to have it. And I think this is their way of making sure that I don't in the future. And I think ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, this is just one element of becoming like what do they do in North Korea, right? I mean, you can't even play World of Warcraft in North Korea. Like you can't do anything in a lot of these countries because they don't like this or they don't like that, and there's very little freedom of choice in any of it. So I mean, ultimately, but I think this is a global thing. Like, this isn't just really a thing in the US. We're just catching up to a lot of other places.
All right. Great take there. Now, AJ, this first question's for Jada. What does your TikTok algorithm look like? Second question here. How would someone go about voicing their concerns? I mean, should we be taking to the streets? Is this an important issue that, maybe people should at least share something on their Facebook or tweet about it, or even write a politician?
Yeah, I mean, definitely call to actions are tough because, like, especially, in this situation, writing to your local politicians or going to town halls or whatever, that's probably not a bad idea. But how many people will actually do that, and will it make a difference? And the government always seems like they're going to do what they want to do anyway by some way, shape, or form. So I'm not saying your voice isn't going to be heard, but I am saying that if you want to make a difference, you have to start writing, calling, spending all of your days getting other people to do it too. I mean, it takes a lot of time, but if you're that passionate about it, I mean, more people should take that path, to be honest. I mean, and also it's just like this whole thing. I understand that it's not like a straight up ban on VPNs. It's going to stop you from going to banned apps. But now, like, that's not defined what a banned app is. So just like, I don't know, we don't know. We can't even define what a security or a commodity is, but we're going to leave it up to the deciders or whatever to pick which websites we are allowed to not go to. I don't know. Honestly, I think we should all just train some pigeons, and that's it. I'm going to make a NFT drop called The Trained Pigeons, and there you can send notes to each other, and that's my idea. There you go.
All right. You know what? You probably get Mike Tyson on board for that one. He might be a big fan. All right. Let's talk about the crypto wars and Charles Hoskinson. He definitely had some hot takes. I do want to just showcase Cardano's price action. It has had a really good pump today. It's up 6.5%. If you look on the 1 month chart, yeah, you can see it's had a pretty nice 24 hours there. But he came forward and speaking about Operation Choke Point 2.0. We broke it down in yesterday's episode. Highly recommend that you go out and check that. He came out and said it was meticulously resourced and the most detailed letter I've ever seen about this. And this is from the law firm Cooper and Kirk and their 35-page document detailing this, that federal bank regulators come for crypto. And it just details a lot of this oversight and this push into crypto. And they're trying to eradicate a lot of the on-ramps and just a lot of the resources and infrastructure behind the entire blockchain tech here. Well, Crypto Crow, we got you up here. We're talking about Cardano. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, I like to talk to you about, bullish case scenarios. Dan from Crypto Capital Ventures, he just did a Cardano price prediction video today. He said $15 potentially. He didn't say it's going there for sure. We love Dan, but he said, it is a real possibility. He outlined the market cap and he explained why. $15 though, that just sounds like such a moon math price target from 33 cents. You're looking at a 45x, close to a 40x from today's levels. Is it possible with Cardano's gigantic market cap size to pull a 40x in the next bull run?
Personally, I think anything is possible with Cardano because if you take into account so many different variables that are in play, inflation obviously being one of them. I mean, I the most recent prediction video I did on Cardano basically said somewhere around $8 could be possible, but anything is possible. You look at it this way. Cardano is being built to be an alternative to the financial structures of countries that either don't have them or have terrible ones, right? I mean, and then on top of that, you have so many different layers. And, I know everybody's looking at a lot of these shit coins that are out there and they're like, look at this one. It has a million transactions per second, but it's really just sending like no data at all. And they're not actually functional blockchains that do what a lot of these other blockchains do. And not only that, but there's so many different things. It's hard to even answer that question clearly, but listen, anything is possible. I mean, I'm counting on at least a $5 Cardano by like late 2024, maybe in 2025. And anything is possible between now and then. And the other thing to note is a lot of people are like, Crow, and I get these messages all the time. Crow, what's going to happen if Cardano becomes a security? And it's like, I was just watching Gary Gensler in his hearing, where he's asking Congress for more money so that he can go after more crypto projects and do his thing. And, one of the things that he was explaining is that, a lot of these projects aren't actually decentralized in the sense that if you have a development team running the project, even if it's technically decentralized from a technological standpoint, if there's a team that you can contact and say, hey, this happened, what can you do to help me or fix it? Then it's not as decentralized as you think. And what is one thing that Cardano is doing that's likely going to be bigger and better than any other blockchain out there? Voltaire. Voltaire is going to be the ultimate direction where Cardano is its own self-maintaining, self-empowered, self-deciding, basically enabling the holders of Cardano to vote on major milestones moving forward, who does what. It's really going to be like Charles is out of it in the sense that he's not going to be running the development. The public is. I'm telling you, I really think of any project out there, Cardano is going to be the one that just absorbs everything else, especially when that Hydra snake grows, man. Those heads are just going to chew up all the shit coins out there in favor of what is ultimately going to play a big role and a major difference in what's going on in crypto.
Well, maybe one of those Hydra heads can start with Voltaire's haircut. There's a picture of Voltaire. He likes to name it after famous philosophers and scientists, from back in the day. Mind Your Biz, two quick questions there. One, what are your thoughts about Voltaire, and is Cardano, what are your just broad thoughts on that, generally speaking? And second, let's separate the fact on whether or not crypto should have a spokesperson. How do you feel about Charles being a spokesperson? Should Charles be in charge? You're muted. Nope. Still. Wait. It's just me.
No.
No,
Oh,
he's
there you go.
muted.
There you go.
I was preaching to the room over here, and you know what? It was beautiful, but
There's a bunch of Cardano fans, and they're still hyped over Crypto Crow's comments. They're like, "Oh my god, I knew it." Hydra.
So you're asking, hey, should Charles be in charge? You're taking us back to the 1980s sitcom, right? Charles in charge. Anybody who doesn't remember it, probably not worth revisiting now. There's way better content.
Hey, shout out to Scott Baio. He played Bob Loblaw on Arrested Development. Best character name ever.
And then he made a blog later on. He made
Yeah, yeah.
blah blah
Yeah,
blah
and that
blog.
law
It was good.
blog dropped a law bomb.
Yeah, it was great. But to to speak to Voltaire, apropos of what we were mentioning before, Voltaire, my favorite quote from Voltaire is that I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. The French had a thing or two that we borrowed from when we started forming this country. In fact, they gave us the Statue of Liberty, right? For anybody who doesn't remember, right, or didn't study that in our history, we've got pretty solid kinship with the French. So when I see them doing things in the streets and showing their discontent, it makes me proud to be associated with them. We have that shared history, commonality with them, and Voltaire was part of that. Should Charles be a self-appointed leader in our movement? I don't know. I don't know if anybody should be. I don't know if anybody should be the self-appointed leader. But here's the thing: we need all hands on deck. We do. We need all hands on deck. So if you have a platform and if you have people who are willing to listen to you, if you've built something that grants you influence, then you're asking me my opinion. My opinion is you should use it for the furtherance of our cause in crypto. So if Charles is willing to do that without it being something that is entirely self-interested and only promoting Cardano, then phenomenal. The unfortunate reality for most people in the space is that we all have our interests, we all have our biases. I've got nothing against Cardano. It's also not if I'm picking winners, it's not there may be some winners that I pick that you don't like or that you don't agree with. And so I've got maybe a little bit of a concern there, but Charles seems like a pretty reasonable guy. He seems like a pretty level-headed guy. He seems like if he can get that audience, and because he has testified in front of Congress before, if he can speak on the side of just decentralization and permissionlessness, then maybe we still stand a fighting chance. But yeah, there's a lot to be concerned about by way of all of the whisperings of Operation Choke Point 2.0. The fact that it's becoming so clear that they're trying to ratchet down our freedoms, and specifically, right, permissionlessness and censorship resistance, right, being able to say what we want, selectively publish what we want, or not publish anything at all using privacy tools like VPNs. I've got some major concerns with that. But again, to go back to your first question, I do appreciate Voltaire's quote, and I stand by it as well. If you want to say something, I want to give you the permission to say it, and I want to defend your right to say it. But if you want to be quiet and you want to be private, I want to defend your right to be private too. That's my stance on it anyway.
All right, mind your biz, yes or no. Does the fact that he's a falconer make you like him more?
Just brings up more questions, DZ.
Oh, that's a great answer. Great answer. All right, well, Tim, he's bringing up a good point where, all these whispers of Operation Choke Point 2.0. Do you think all these whispers, is this a crackdown on crypto to move the spotlight off of banking and make it seem like crypto is the real problem, not our traditional finance sector?
Was that supposed to be a whisper? If they were trying to whisper about that, then they are doing a terrible job. Because it's obviously collusion to try to take down the entire crypto space. They're trying to blame everything bad going on in crypto because we're in the fight zone. We're in the season of time where the government and centralized authorities are going to fight anything that might take their power away. And guess what? That is crypto. That's exactly what it is. So that's not really a whisper. That's kind of facts at this point. Are they colluding
I'll
against
fight
crypto?
to the death. You're right to throw that shade.
Yeah, and if they, they're not going to win. That's the other thing, is they're not going to win. Going back to some things you asked the other guys too. I don't think so. When you talk about Charles being a spokesperson, I think I said this on a previous episode around the blockchain, but I do think that we need to make sure as crypto people we learn our lesson from the Elon Musk debacle. I'm talking about back in 2021, where he became the pinnacle, the face of Bitcoin, the face of crypto. We had that massive bull market. We got the thumbs up from Elon Musk. But then in May of 2021, when he decided that he wanted to dump it because of environmental concerns, all of a sudden we had a huge crash. And we made the mistake of making him the voice, the face, the riding knight in shining armor. And then when he turned his head and said something that we didn't like that he said, people followed him. In the same way, I like Charles Hoskinson. I like what he stands for. I love Cardano, the project, what their mission, their vision, their core values as a coin are. But I'm not going to make the same mistake of looking at him like a knight in shining armor. I think that's the beauty of cryptocurrency and decentralized currency is the fact that there is no foremost leader. There is no main person. It is an army of little people who are going to finally stand up. And that's when revolutions happen. Yes, there's always the person at the front of the line screaming the loudest. And maybe we do need some big figures at the front of the line screaming loud. But let's not just rely upon them and say, yep, he speaks for me. No, like every single person needs to have their own voice. Every single person needs to fight for their rights to be able to have a decentralized world. Oh, yeah, there you go. That's a party.
All right.
No, I think, and again, I like Cardano. I think it's going to be there. Cardano's been one of those frustrating coins. Although right now, again, I'm doing radio TA. There's a very interesting thing on the charts that is looking like a bull pennant that could send us back up to 43 cents. And then you go deeper into Dan's prediction. By the way, I love Dan, Crypto Capital Venture. He is one of my favorite crypto YouTubers, very good friend of mine. I want to make sure he's quoted correctly. He doesn't think it's going to happen by this next bull market. He's predicting a couple. But just so people understand this, if we see this next bull market do similar things to past ones, and there's widespread belief that by the peak of the next bull market, we could see $11 trillion in total market cap for crypto, and that would be a low prediction. Even if Cardano just kept its current rate of dominance, we could see somewhere between, depending on how much we pump, anywhere from $7 up to that $15 in a massive bullish scenario. More than likely 7 to 10 is a realistic prediction. But unless something just breaks and Cardano crashes and burns and dies, which I do not see happening, you're welcome to your own opinions on that issue. Watch Cardano have a very, very impressive bull run, because all the main cryptos are going to have impressive bull runs, because people are terrified of these banks. They do not trust centralized authorities anymore, and they're looking from somewhere else to put their store of value. Crypto is the answer.
All right, another price prediction there coming in $7 to $10. My personal range is, I'm guessing $8.63 if I had to just throw out a real number. Well, Tim, you said a powerful word there, and that word was revolution. AJ, does crypto, to have a revolution, maybe a revolution needs a face? Do we need a revolutionary leader? Do we need that Paul Revere for crypto to make it to the next level? And also, you do a little TA. Do you want to share your Cardano bull run price prediction?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, so, I don't know if we need a face. I don't think we need one person. I think there's strength in numbers. I think the identity of a group is better than just one leader. I mean, I don't even know who that would be, because there's like, no one's perfect, and whoever it was, everyone would have a reason why it shouldn't be them, and it would be this big thing. So I really think we could band together on the cause instead of arguing over who should lead it. I know that's just how I feel about that. But also, the whole Operation Choke Point 2.0, it's obviously a coordinated attack against crypto. It's been happening, started before this year, but this year is just so blatantly obvious what they're doing. It's just like every day there's another story on the news, like even the Restrict Act. That's just another part of Operation Choke Point. Now, like, they're going off the off ramps. They're going after the banks. Now they're even going after the VPNs, and Elizabeth Warren's going after the wallets. It's just like, it just never ends, and it's clearly what it is. And if they think we're stupid, like, I don't know what to say. But in terms of Cardano TA, I would just pull it up the daily chart, and actually it looks really good. If it pops up back over like the 41 cent range, I think that it bounced off the 50 on the RSI, and there's a double top forming on the Bitcoin dominance, which could lead to a little altcoin run. I could see Cardano, if things work out, probably end up around 50 cents in the next, like, I don't know, couple of weeks, unless it just gets completely shut down. It has to get back over the 42, 43 cent level. But in terms of for that to be possible, but in terms of a bull run prediction for Cardano, I'm looking at $7 or $8.
All right, great prediction. All right, we're coming in. Throw out a cent. I did 863. What's your penny amount on there?
770.
770. All right.
777.
I think I agree with your thesis there. We don't really need any one particular face. People say it should be Charles. Too much of a niche. It should be Vitalik. He's hung. Maybe around some of the wrong people, so people might have an issue with that. I think it should be.
Make fun of my twerking, and you're talking about Vitalik.
Wow.
I think it should be Satoshi because he is pseudonymous. So I think Satoshi is the perfect spokesperson, because we don't know who, or the multiple people who it was. But that is all we have time for. And I think Mind Your Biz took it home. Mind Your Biz, you got some strong thoughts on privacy. We all loved hearing it. And Voltaire quote, just pulled that out of the ether there, took you to victory. So Mind Your Biz, I don't even know if it's possible. Could you leave us any alpha?
Oh, you're way too kind to think that I have any alpha to drop. Just a strong desire for freedom and privacy, my friend. Thank you for having me back on the channel. Great to be surrounded by such great thinkers. And I think if anybody's watching right now and you're wondering, am I in the right place? Yeah, you're in the right place. Bring a friend next time. Thank you for having me again.
All right, that's all we have. Make sure you go in the links. Check out everyone's channel. They're putting out great content. We also love Crypto Capital Ventures. Maybe leave a comment on his next video. Say, hey, join ATB. We love to have him on. Maybe a ADA episode. Who knows? All right, that's all we have time for. Until next time, hit that like button. DZ out.